Most people think they need more discipline, more motivation, or better habits to change their life. But that belief is exactly why they stay stuck. If effort alone worked, you would already be living the life you want. The real reason change feels impossible has nothing to do with laziness or lack of willpower. It comes from something far deeper, something most people never question. You are not failing because you are weak. You are failing because you are loyal to an identity you never consciously chose. And until that identity changes, everything else eventually snaps back to where it started. When people try to reinvent themselves, they usually attack the surface. They wake up earlier, buy planners, follow routines, watch productivity videos, and swear this time will be different. For a few weeks, sometimes even a few months, it feels like progress. Then, slowly, without warning, old patterns return, motivation fades, energy drops, self-sabotage creeps back in. And the worst part is not the failure itself, but the conclusion people draw from it. They decide something must be wrong with them. They assume they are broken. In reality, they were trying to build a new life on top of an old self-image that could not support it. Identity is the invisible force that determines what feels natural to you and what feels impossible. It shapes the decisions you make when no one is watching. It controls what you believe you deserve. It decides what you tolerate, what you chase, and what you avoid. If your identity says you are someone who struggles, then struggle will follow you, even into success. If your identity says you are not the kind of person who finishes things, you will find ways to quit without even realizing why. This is not philosophy. This is how the brain conserves energy and maintains consistency. Most people are never taught that identity operates like a thermostat. It regulates your behavior back to a familiar level. You might temporarily rise above it, but eventually your thoughts, emotions, and actions adjust to match who you believe you are. This is why external change rarely lasts. You can force yourself to act out of character for a while, but you cannot live there permanently without changing the character itself. A useful way to understand this is to imagine a fish that grows only as large as its environment allows. Put it in a small bowl, and it stays small. Move it to a larger body of water, and it expands. Humans are no different. The bowl is not money, circumstances, or luck. The bowl is identity. It is the internal boundary that says, this is who I am, and this is who I am not. Anything that threatens that boundary triggers resistance, fear, and self-doubt. Identity is built from stories, not dramatic stories, but quiet, repeated narratives you have told yourself for years. Stories formed from childhood moments, social feedback, small failures, and emotional memories. A single embarrassing experience can quietly define you for decades if you never question it. One moment of shame can become a permanent label. Over time, these stories harden into assumptions. You stop hearing them as thoughts and start experiencing them as facts. Someone might say they are bad with money, bad at relationships, not creative, not confident, not disciplined, or not lucky. These statements feel true because they have been rehearsed internally thousands of times. But truth and familiarity are not the same thing. The brain prefers what is familiar over what is accurate. That preference is what keeps people trapped. One of the most dangerous mistakes people make during personal growth is confusing awareness with transformation. They learn why they are the way they are. They analyze their past. They uncover emotional wounds. They understand their patterns. But understanding alone does not rewrite identity. In fact, it can strengthen it if you are not careful. You begin to see yourself as someone who is damaged, healing, or unfinished. That becomes a new identity that keeps you stuck in the same loop, just with better vocabulary. Real identity change does not come from endlessly fixing the past. It comes from building evidence for a new self-image in the present. The brain updates beliefs based on repeated experience, not insight. This is why people can intellectually know what to do and still fail to do it. Knowledge does not override identity. Behavior does. Before you can change who you are becoming, you have to see how your current identity is protecting itself. Every identity, even a painful one, offers some form of safety. Being the person who never tries protects you from rejection. Being the person who says it is too late protects you from risk. Being the person who stays busy but never finishes protects you from accountability. These identities are not flaws. They are strategies your nervous system learned to survive. This is why forcing change often backfires. When you try to act like someone you are not yet wired to be, your brain interprets it as a threat. That threat triggers anxiety, procrastination, and rationalization. You tell yourself the timing is wrong. You wait to feel ready. You convince yourself you need more information. These are not character defects. They are defense mechanisms. You must stop asking what you want to do and start asking who you are training yourself to become. This is where most people get it backwards. They chase goals without defining the person capable of sustaining them. They focus on outcomes instead of self-concept. The result is constant friction and eventual burnout. A more effective approach is to design a future version of yourself that feels real enough to move toward, but close enough to believe in. Not 5 or 10 years away, but someone you could realistically start becoming now. This version of you is not perfect. They still struggle. They still learn, but they operate from a different baseline. They make different default choices. They respond differently under pressure. One powerful way to clarify this future identity is to imagine an ordinary week lived as that person. Not a fantasy vacation or highlight reel, but a normal week. How they structure their days. How they speak to themselves when things go wrong. How they spend their time when no one is watching. Identity lives in the mundane, not the extraordinary. This exercise works because the brain does not distinguish sharply between imagined experience and real experience. When you repeatedly visualize yourself operating as a different person, you begin loosening the grip of the old identity. You are creating a cognitive reference point. Over time, that reference point starts to feel familiar. Familiarity reduces fear. Reduced fear increases action. But visualization alone is not enough. Identity is installed through action. The fastest way to rewire self-image is to behave in ways that contradict your old stories. Not dramatically, but consistently. The brain updates beliefs through a simple mechanism. Neurons that fire together wire together. Every time you act in alignment with a new identity, you weaken the old one and strengthen the new one. This is why doing matters more than planning. Planning keeps identity safe. Doing challenges it. You can plan for years without threatening who you believe you are. Action forces the brain to reconcile new evidence. When you do something you believed you could not do, even in a small way, the story begins to crack. Many people wait for confidence before acting. In reality, confidence is a side effect of evidence. You do not become confident and then act. You act, survive the experience, and confidence emerges. This applies to social skills, discipline, creativity, leadership, and self-control. The brain needs proof, not promises. This is also why starting small is not about comfort, but about consistency. Small actions done repeatedly signal identity change more effectively than large actions done once. A person who writes one paragraph every day is training the identity of a writer more effectively than someone who writes 1,000 words once a month. Identity responds to frequency, not intensity. As you act in alignment with your new identity, Resistance will appear. Old thoughts will surface. Doubt will get louder. This is not a sign you are doing it wrong. It is a sign you are doing it right. The old identity is fighting for relevance. It wants to restore equilibrium. If you interpret this resistance as failure, you retreat. If you interpret it as rewiring, you continue. Eventually, a shift happens. The new behaviors stop feeling forced. They start feeling normal. The old patterns lose emotional charge. You still remember them, but they no longer define you. This is identity change. It is quiet, it is gradual, and it is permanent when done correctly. One of the most useful frameworks for understanding this comes from the idea popularized in Atomic Habits by James Clear. The core insight is that the goal is not the behavior itself, but the type of person who performs that behavior. You do not run to achieve fitness. You run to reinforce the identity of someone who values their body. You do not save money to hit a number. You save to become someone who respects their future self. When identity leads, habits follow naturally. When habits lead without identity, they collapse under pressure. This is why sustainable change always moves from the inside out. If you are listening to this and feeling both excited and uncomfortable, that is a good sign. It means something in you recognizes the truth. You do not need to become someone else. You need to stop being loyal to a version of yourself that no longer fits. Identity is not fixed. It is trained. And once you understand that, change stops feeling like a fight and starts feeling like a process. The most powerful decision you can make today is not to do more, but to choose who you are becoming and start acting in alignment with that choice, even when it feels unfamiliar, especially when it feels unfamiliar, because that discomfort is the sound of growth happening. Your future self is not waiting for motivation. They are waiting for you to act as if they already exist.